Greetings, my friends. I want to thank you all for subscribing to this channel. If you are a subscriber, please check to make sure that you are still subscribed because YouTube unsubscribes people every day. And if you have not subscribed, please consider supporting this channel. We could use your help in our war to save pop culture. Thank you and enjoy the video. Viacom CBS, in an act of transparent desperation, has yet again announced another show they can't afford to make that nobody wants to see. Just like Star Trek 4 with Hemsworth, like Section 31, like Star Trek 4 again without Hemsworth, like Tarantino Trek, a string of phony announcements in search of funding from investors who don't see the huge plume of smoke rising into the sky as the incompetents in charge of Star Trek gleefully raise the franchise to the ground, driving the fans away in droves. It would be funny if it weren't so tragic, this shout of, "Hey kids, let's put on a show in the barn," as they stand in the blackened and gutted frame of the barn they themselves raised, shouting to an empty field where everyone has moved on. Whether deliberately or through neglect or incompetence or through a horrible contract they can't escape, Viacom CBS has overseen the utter corruption and destruction of the once proud and once profitable Star Trek franchise. It has hired writers who know virtually nothing about Star Trek, writers who have yet to produce a coherent script, writers who have actively mocked Star Trek in the most hateful way imaginable, turning tribbles into human tribble hybrids and then feeding them to children in a joke almost as sick as the joke the show has become. But in a recent article published on StarTrek.com, an article as official as it gets, the idiots who have destroyed Star Trek publicly and proudly admit that with Star Trek Picard, their intention all along was to degrade Jean-Luc Picard. I have maintained all along, from day one, that Star Trek Discovery and Star Trek Picard was being created by people hostile to Star Trek. Now the notion that Kurtzman and Secret Hideout have done their best to break Star Trek, to bend, fold, spindle, and mutilate it into a twisted parody of what it was, to teach audiences a lesson about entitlement, has been confirmed by CBS itself in an article on StarTrek.com entitled "The Humbling of Admiral Picard." Riddle me this, Viacom CBS. What kind of marketing genius decided the way to revive a franchise is to humiliate its hero? CBS investors, are you happy that Secret Hideout and CBS decided to turn Star Trek into a political statement, calling Jean-Luc Picard to account for the crime of having male privilege on your dime and at your expense? Does it fill you with confidence as stockholders, given your massive losses recently, that Viacom CBS allowed Kurtzman and his infinite number of typing monkeys to take Jean-Luc Picard and actively degrade him? Turn him from a hero into a lecture on imperialism designed to put all those Star Trek fans in their place, to not only make Jean-Luc Picard ashamed and humiliated, but to make all his fans ashamed and humiliated too, for the unforgivable crime of growing up loving Picard. Instead of just giving fans what they wanted, a Star Trek series filled with adventure, exploration, and optimism, Kurtzman and Secret Hideout gave us a pile of crap dumped squarely on the heads of fans to make them feel bad about Picard, about Star Trek, and about themselves. Don't believe me? Let's examine what they themselves have admitted about how their entire aim this season was to humble Jean-Luc Picard. The humbling of Admiral Picard. In 2020, representation and inclusion have just as much, if not more, importance than diversity. Claiming to be an ally to marginalized people without acknowledging your own privilege feels hollow. Picard's ensemble of writers and actors lean into all of this. Even number one, the dog, represents a marginalized community, serving up a multi-layered narrative that explores how power and privilege play out in relationships with people who are different. When I read that even number one, the dog, represents a marginalized community, I laughed and I had to stop and check to make sure I wasn't being pranked. Was this trolling? Was this actually a satire from the Babylon Bee or The Onion? But no, it was straight off of StarTrek.com. They were being serious. This is their mentality. From the start, they had one primary aim: to put their hero in his place. Doesn't matter the reason, honestly. This is a public declaration of incompetence and indifference to giving investors a solid return on their hard-earned money. Where the writers and Viacom CBS should have primarily been concerned with creating a slam-bang Star Trek series that would thrill fans and give Picard a victory lap, setting up a brand new series to run for 7 seasons and draw people to CBS All Access in droves. That wasn't their agenda. They didn't care about creating profits by giving fans what they wanted. No! They wanted to degrade their hero and shame audiences for having Picard with all his despicable privilege as a hero. They wanted to shame fans for liking their product. You don't believe me still? Let's see what else they confess in their own article. While TNG positioned Captain Picard as an ally to marginalized groups, from Klingons to androids, Picard challenges him to check the privilege he's enjoyed through various series as an able-bodied male Earthling of elevated Starfleet rank. Here are 6 times Picard called Picard out during Season 1. So again, they confess it. They wanted to knock Picard down several pegs for the unpardonable crime of being a privileged male. Never mind, they admit in The Next Generation he always did his best to be an ally to marginalized groups. That wasn't enough. Nope, they needed Picard punished. They needed him humbled. For what? For being a privileged male who is not of color. They wanted him humbled and degraded just for being who he was, what he was. Holy racism and sexism, Batman! Alas, the only ones who have been truly degraded and humbled are the investors who were promised a Star Trek series and got, instead of profits, a lecture about imperialism and white privilege from people hell-bent on tearing down a Star Trek icon. But what are the many ways they degraded Picard? They listed 6, so let's examine them, shall we? By their own admission, quote, here are 6 times Picard called out Picard during Season 1. Picard is finally getting old. That's the first header. So, am I to take it the writers of Star Trek Picard think people should be called out for aging? Isn't that ageist to call out age as a negative? Isn't that reprehensible? Despicable? Isn't that a form of hate speech? Well done, Viacom CBS. Let's shame Picard for getting old. Just what fans wanted, to be reminded of their own mortality and to be shamed for it. That's the kind of feel-good stuff that drove fans to love Star Trek all these years and buy merchandise, probably why merchandise is flying off the shelves now. Oh wait, it isn't, is it? Gee, could it be maybe this garbage is a failure? But let's see what they have to say specifically on this point of Picard aging. This article revels in the fact that Picard, quote, is in no position to save anybody, and in fact, his inability to do so results in Dahj's untimely death. Wow. Well, you can't degrade a hero more than that, can you? The writers deliberately and gleefully made Picard impotent and feeble with age, and then tried to arrange things so that Dahj would die in such a way that Picard would be to blame. That was their intention, anyway. Of course, the incompetence of the writers ensured that this plot point wouldn't work at all, for one simple reason. From the very first scene with Dahj, the entire plot is completely nonsensical. In the opening scene, an entire hit squad of Romulans beams into Dahj's apartment to either abduct or kill her. They know she's an android, that she's potentially deadly, so they go in there and kill the boyfriend first. They screw around, they don't incapacitate her, they don't bind her, they take the time to fumble a black bag over her head, giving her time to activate and kill them all. But it begs one question of spectacular incompetence that these writers have no answer for. Instead of this silly-ass action scene where the Romulans all die attacking Dahj in her apartment, why don't they just beam her out of the apartment? Abductor, killer, whatever their aim, why don't they just beam her out of the apartment? It's idiocy of spectacular proportions, a stupid blunder so glaring and painful it staggers the imagination. If they can beam a bunch of Romulans in, they can just beam her out. Beam her straight into a brig if they want to interrogate her, or straight into space if they want her to die, into space, under the ocean, into a sun. The point being, if these writers actually watched Star Trek and paused for even a moment to reflect on what a transporter is, they'd have realized that this scene is nonsense. In reality, the Romulans wouldn't have bothered beaming in to attack Dahj. They'd have beamed her out. She'd never have met Picard, and the show would have been put out of the fans' misery. Too bad they weren't as focused on making good Star Trek as they were on making Picard look bad. But this display of utter and naked narrative incompetence has unfortunately been the hallmark of Star Trek under Kurtzman's watch. Star Trek has gone from being one of the best written shows to the very worst. So what was the second way this article admits to humbling Picard? Picard is no longer relevant. That's right, gang. Viacom CBS made a Star Trek where the hero was a big nothing. By design. Picard was an aging embarrassment who failed to save Dahj and is no longer relevant. Way to sell a show, Viacom CBS. Tell me, is Strange New Worlds going to be this good? Is it going to be interested in calling out Pike for his male privilege at the expense of his dignity and to the detriment of stockholders and investors? Fans know this shit isn't Star Trek. I wonder how long it will take for stockholders to realize it too. But this is what the article gleefully says about how Picard was degraded in this instance. And bear in mind, this is an official Star Trek article on StarTrek.com. This is not speculation. These are their own words. Not being relevant is the ultimate slap in the face for high-profile people used to calling the shots. Picard is visibly bothered when a Starfleet receptionist asks for his name, and when he arrives for his meeting with Admiral Clancy, she too takes him down a peg, calling out his sheer effing hubris for even showing up with a request for reassignment, calling his Tal Shiar conspiracy theory the delusions of a once great man, desperate to matter. This article is reveling over the writers of Picard giving Picard the ultimate slap in the face, and by proxy, an ultimate slap in the face to fans. But what these idiots seem to have forgotten is a slap in the face to fans is a slap in the face to investors. Where do you think your profits come from, if not from fans? Or in this case, the lack of profits. They go on to chortle in the article, his resignation wrecked his relationships. When Picard finally does try to reconnect with them, they're not having it, and with good reason. While he's been writing out his post-resignation, quote, massive pity party and shame spiral, unquote, in luxurious Chateau Picard, Raffi's been sinking into the depths of humiliation, rage, and substance abuse, something she already struggled with. This is the thinking of these sad little whiners posing as writers. They admit Raffi was already a junkie, but Picard is to blame for her being a junkie because he resigned Starfleet out of principle. Love how this article gleefully says Picard writes out his post-resignation in a, quote, massive pity party and shame spiral. What the hell else was he supposed to do? Commit seppuku? Picard was living his life, but apparently this article wants to shame him for even living his life quietly. What right does Picard have to live his life in peace? Shouldn't he be beating himself up for his male privilege every day, berating himself for having an ancestral home while so many go without? Well, actually, if they were Star Trek fans, they'd know that this is the Federation, so most people are pretty much taken care of, but never mind. Male privilege. Picard is scum for who and what he is, despite a career of doing good, doing his best. These racists and sexists don't really care about what an individual does, but only the color of his skin and whether he has a dinky in his pantaloons. This is what Star Trek has become. A shaming festival where the heart of the franchise has to be torn out and placed on the altar of wokeness at the expense of profits. Is this article done pointing out all the ways Picard was humiliated? Hell no! They're just getting warmed up as they gleefully point out, and he just keeps messing up. If Picard materializing on Vashti bedecked in classic colonizer garb isn't a harbinger of poor choices and broken promises to come, I don't know what is. Like misguided international aid groups of the late 20th century Earth, Picard and his Federation were guilty of having, quote, no understanding of the ingenuity, resolve, and self-sufficiency, unquote, of the people they were trying to save, says former Senator Tengeb Andreev. And then they forgot about them completely. Oh, the lapse of logic in that. So they deck out Picard as a clown, a plantation owner, and are so eager to degrade him and make their own hero look ridiculous, these writers are too incompetent to even make their point. In case you haven't seen this horrible mess of a show, the writers express their contempt for the Romulans as third world characters in need of saving by the Great White Federation, which is an absurd premise. The Romulan Empire is an empire, you morons! They have massive fleets, as massive as the Federation, and if the Federation can evacuate a damn planet, so can they. The writers again ignore Star Trek lore as well as common sense, making the Romulans out to be Vietnamese boat people in need of rescue by the Great White Federation, an idiotic premise. If the Romulan Empire is big enough to threaten the Federation, they have enough ships to save themselves, you arrogant, privileged male writers. But hilariously, these hacks can't even keep their own premise straight. Because in the scene where Picard goes into the bar, the Romulan bitches at him, you dropped us here and then left us without finishing the job. And then bitches at him, and why did you presume that we needed your help, you arrogant bastard? So which is it, you contemptible hacks? Are the Romulans mad because they needed his help and he didn't help them? Or are they mad at him for presuming they needed help when they didn't? This is the level of writing Star Trek is now known for. This is the stain on the franchise that no amount of phony celebration and public investment pitches can hide. Good God, folks. No exaggeration is needed. It really is this bad. But they couldn't even allow Picard a decent life or a dignified death. Another way they humiliated Picard this season, but he's still organic. In this section, they basically call Picard a dummy for not realizing a synthetic super race might exist. Well, in this section, I call the writers dummies for implementing this idea so incompetently. The idea here is a synthetic super race left a message for synths in our universe saying, hey, call us when you evolve and we'll come wipe out all organic life for you. Sutra does just that, triggers a beacon, and the super advanced AIs start coming through a portal hilariously glimpsed with monster tentacles like they're Cthulhu or some crap like that. Tentacles, how very advanced, Kurtzman. So anyway, Sutra changes her mind and shuts off the beacon, and the portal closes and everyone is saved, right? Wrong. The super AIs, being alerted now by the beacon and having opened a portal into our universe, aren't just gonna go away because Sutra hangs up the phone. They have been alerted. They opened a portal to our universe. They know where we are. They know a beacon was triggered. They know where it is. And being way more advanced than we are, they don't need our cooperation or assistance. They can just reopen the portal and come and destroy all life, which is exactly what they did. So thanks to Kurtzman and Chabon, Star Trek is literally dead because the AIs came through and killed everyone as dead as the franchise. Writing matters, CBS. I guess you're learning this too late, alas. Then this article yammers on about Picard's friends make him a better person, blah, 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 but I'm sick of this. I've made my case. StarTrek.com publicly admits their aim was to humble Picard this season. This is how they did it, and we're supposed to get excited about Star Trek again. Strange New World. Who gives a damn when the company making these things cares more about belittling Star Trek to make political points than making something that fans want? They say that insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. Well, with Strange New World, the new desecration CBS is pitching to fans and maybe even investors, since they are strapped for cash, allegedly. This is a show that will be created by the same people responsible for Star Trek Discovery and Star Trek Picard. We all know how wonderful those were, so why should anyone be interested? When you're actively mocking your own shows and heroes, you shouldn't be surprised when fans start mocking you too. When you're mocking your own show, your own hero, you're in trouble. You have violated your own dream, desecrated your own franchise. You have mocked fans for giving you their money. And believe me, the fans now feel very foolish doing so. That's why there isn't any merchandise in the stores anymore to speak of. That's why nobody gives a damn. That's why a lot of fans actively hate Star Trek now. This is what happens when companies like Viacom CBS forget the most fundamental business practice of all. You should try to sell customers something they want. And nobody wanted to see Picard degraded and humiliated to make some kind of political point, a point absolutely lost in the nonsensical plot and incompetent implementation by writers who shouldn't even be allowed to write copy for the back of cereal boxes. Chances are, these hacks would write something that would make little Timmy and Sue feel shamed and guilty for eating cereal. Put them off cereal for the rest of their lives, that copy would. This is their economic model. Shame the audience for consuming the product, mock the product, and then wonder why your profits are in the toilet. Star Trek, Strange New World. It is indeed a strange new world when profits no longer matter, when you keep making the same failed garbage with the same failed writers for an audience that's gone. Strange New World when you make a show hell-bent on mocking your hero and making your audience feel bad about ever loving him. Profit is no longer on the agenda when you're hell-bent on destroying your own hero. Shouldn't that be clear enough without me pointing it out? From the center of the earth, this is Dictor Van Doomcock bidding you all, my friends, stay angry.
Ha 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 ha.